It is a big morning that we are looking at, and I'm joined in by my colleague Pankaj Mishra, who's also there with us, and we will discuss as the day progresses on this particular aspect. And interestingly enough, let's start off with what the Times of India has covered, and very interestingly, a whale kind of a threat from China. China seems to be a little unsettled when it comes to the issue of India deepening its ties with the United States. And probably there are a lot of geopolitical factors that is in play when it comes to this relationship. And of course, AI, America-India partnership for the 21st century, is something that seems to be unsettling the dragon so much that it gives a very interesting statement. I'll go through that particular article as first. It looks like this is what it says. As the US India now combined into AI, look to remove barriers in defense and high tech trade, and irked China on Monday called upon relevant countries to act in ways conducive to mutual trust between regional countries in the field of security and stability in the region. It has been China's long-standing position that military cooperation between states should not undermine regional peace and stability and target the third party or even harm the interests of the third party, said a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson responding to a query about the deal signed during Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. So the issue about is not whether the US is getting a foothold. The issue more about here is that India might be catching up with a lot of technological advantages when it comes to the defense tech, and this is something that is worrying China. Interestingly enough, the AI partnership has been defined by Prime Minister Modi as a defining partnership for the 21st century. My colleague Pankaj, in fact, joins in. Pankaj, we know how the Chinese speak. We know how the Chinese make statements that are direct and indirect. And over here, the Chinese seems to be completely unsettled. And interestingly, on AI bonhomie, China urges mutual trust in the region. How much of trust can any of the nations have when you have a very assertive dragon at your doorstep?
Well, not at all. You're right. As far as the trust factor is concerned with China, it's like the taste of its own medicine to China. With this improved India-US ties, there have been indications that China is unhappy with it, and this particular statement that any cooperation, bilateral cooperation, should not undermine the interests of the third party only goes on to show, Varghese, that how China looks at the whole scenario as of now. See, there are two, three aspects which China, in my opinion, would be wary of when US finds a very steady partner in India and vice versa. The first one is Chinese intervention in Taiwan. We have seen time and again how China has been trying to influence the Taiwanese leadership and has been flying its jets all over the country. And this has been meted with stiff resistance from Taiwan and from the United States as well. And we have seen at times confrontation between the jets and the naval fleets of both the US and China as far as the Taiwanese waters and air is concerned. The second part is the Indo-Pacific region. Prime Minister Modi spoke about a free and independent Indo-Pacific region where there is no regional intervention, and that was a significant mention without naming China. That aspect, China has been using it towards its benefit, has been flexing its muscle in that particular region, and has not been heeding to the international demands that it should not treat the region as its own property. And the third one is obviously the South China Sea, where China is not just building infrastructure on islands, but also trying to dissuade other players, other countries, either Navy or Air Force, to even cross that area. So these three aspects, as of now, is something that if China looks at India, or for that matter, United States, so a joint collaboration between the two is something that will give sleepless nights to China because earlier also we had seen Varghese how China had raised questions on Washington that it should not be interfering in matters between two countries, that was India and China at that time. Remember, there was Galwan, and then there was one more skirmish that had happened in Arunachal Pradesh. And following that, when the United States had actually raised concerns and come out with a data that how many times China has actually violated the LAC's pact and LAC's rules and ethics. At that point of time, China, Beijing had actually lambasted Washington and had asked its diplomats to keep it to themselves and not interfere. So, yes, for China, as its role becomes more and more clear in the Russia Ukraine war, also, this bonhomie between India and United States definitely is a cause of concern for Beijing. And in the days to come, obviously, we will see how things pan out as far as the Chinese reflexes and reaction to this particular deal is
Well,
concerned
interestingly
between
enough,
India and the
Pankaj, I'll
United
just read
States.
one more thing how their media has portrayed it. They say that the Global Times newspaper said in an editorial on Saturday that the US was going to lose its bet on China's neighboring region, and that becoming a pawn in US containment of China didn't align with India's interests and principle, nor did it preserve its dignity as a major power. The summit saw India and US signing a landmark agreement for co-production of jet engines with unprecedented transfer of technology. So it looks like the Chinese have tried to even belittle us for having the kind of relationship upgrade that we're having with the United States, saying that it's not up to your dignity as a great power to be with the US camp. This all, in fact, points out to a person who seems to be quite unsettled, because when it comes to the arch of containing China, we look that Japan and South Korea is strong on one end of the arch, and India, if it's part of the arch, or which tends to be making a very kind of ambiguous statement on that, seems to be the other strong point of it, while the rest of the countries in between is where the US has been trying to supply some kind of an effort to contain China, especially when it comes to the missile things. Well, these are the happenings that we are seeing when it comes to China, and how China has been making that kind of statements when it comes to the situation.